My name is Linda McAllister. I'm 61 years old, widowed. I live in a quiet suburb just outside Eugene, Oregon, in the same house where I raised my two kids, Jenna and Adam. For the past 22 years, I've worked as an office manager at a mid-sized law firm. It's steady work, reliable, like me. I have always prided myself on being dependable, one of those people you could count on in the rain, in the dark, in the mess. And for most of my adult life, that's exactly who I've been. When my husband died suddenly in a car crash, I didn't fall apart. I didn't crumble. I had two teenagers to raise, a mortgage to pay, and not a lot of options. So I did what I had to. I stood up and I got on with it. Last Tuesday started like any other. I got up early, made coffee, fed my dog, checked my email. That's when I saw it. No subject line, just Jenna, sitting there bolded in my inbox. I smiled. She hadn't emailed me in a while. She'd been busy planning her wedding, which last I heard was coming together beautifully. We'd talked about it just a few weeks earlier. I'd already contributed $30,000 to help her book the vineyard she'd always dreamed of, plus the florist she'd loved since college and a high-end photographer she swore by. So when I clicked that email, I expected a sweet update, maybe some new photos of the dress or a link to the catering menu. I wasn't ready for what I read. It started with just one word: Mom. No dear mom, no warmth, just a cold header like I was a contact, not a person. The message explained that Jenna and her fiancé, Nate, along with Nate's parents, had finalized the guest list for their ceremony in Napa Valley. She wrote that after a lot of thought, they had decided it would be best for me not to attend in person. Instead, she said I could watch the wedding via live stream. She said Nate's mom was particular about the guest count and that they wanted to keep the event intimate. And then came the kicker. If you want to be part of it, you can join through the Google Meet link. Should be just like being there, LOL. I sat there for a long time. My coffee went cold in my hand. No tears, no shaking, just this strange stillness, like something inside me had cracked open, but I was still standing. I wrote back 4 words. Sure, enjoy your day. I didn't try to argue. I didn't ask why. I didn't scream. I just let those 4 words speak for themselves, because sometimes silence is louder than rage, and I needed her to feel that silence. I closed my— How does a child you've loved through every hardship grow into a person who uninvites you from the most important day of her life? At Caldwell and Hayes Law, I've worked for over 2 decades. My desk is right by the front windows. I know where the printer jams, which pens disappear fastest, and how each of the partners takes their coffee. After my husband passed, this job became my anchor. I stayed late. I never called out sick. I made it work because I had to. There were so many nights when I was folding laundry in silence, doing the math on whether I could afford both groceries and Jenna's college deposit. When Jenna changed majors twice and needed an extra semester, I made it happen. When she got a short-term job in New York and needed help covering rent, I wired money before she could ask twice. When she called me crying at 2 a.m. after her second engagement fell through, I booked a flight the next morning, flew out, held her, and made her peppermint tea in a rental apartment that didn't feel like home. And Adam? When he and his fiancée wanted to buy their first house, I co-signed the loan and covered the $12,000 deposit. I didn't think twice. That's what moms do, right? We give. But that email from Jenna, it didn't just sting. It rewrote everything. It made me feel like a utility, like I had a purpose once, and now I was past my expiration date, like my only value was in the checks I could write. Back at work that day, my boss Greg stopped by my desk. Greg is the kind of man who notices when someone seems off. He placed a coffee, latte, just the way I like it, on my desk and looked at me. "You okay?" he asked gently. I opened my mouth to lie, to say I hadn't slept well, but something in me hesitated. I didn't tell him the whole truth, but I nodded and whispered, "Just a rough morning." He didn't press, just gave my shoulder a squeeze and walked away. That small kindness, it nearly broke me. Around noon, my phone buzzed. It was Jenna. Her name lit up my screen. Voicemails, texts. "Mom, please answer. We need to talk. This isn't funny." I didn't pick up. Not yet. I sat at my desk, sipping my coffee, thinking to myself, maybe it's time to stop being the one who always picks up. Maybe it's time to stop playing a role in a story that no longer has room for me. By the end of the day, I had made a decision. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but out of something far more powerful: self-respect. I didn't go home after work. Instead, I drove down a few blocks to the First River Credit Union, the same place where I've done my banking since the kids were in grade school. Daniel, the branch manager, greeted me with his usual smile. "Mrs. McCallum, I'm sure." And just like that, I reclaimed a piece of myself. $50,000. That's how much I was about to wire on top of the $30,000 I'd already given for a wedding I wasn't invited to. I signed the cancellation forms, thanked Daniel, and walked out of the bank without a second thought. I didn't cry. I didn't second-guess myself. It felt like closing a door that should have been shut a long time ago. When I got home, the sun was beginning to set. I parked in the driveway, noting how quiet the neighborhood was. The kind of quiet that used to soothe me, but now it just matched the silence inside. I opened my phone. 9 missed calls from Jenna, 2 from Adam, 1 voicemail that read simply, "Mom, please don't do this." I turned the phone off. I walked into the kitchen and reached for a bottle of red wine I had saved since Thanksgiving. I hadn't opened it then because Jenna was supposed to visit, but she'd canceled last minute. Work stuff, she said. I had made a pie and set out her favorite plates anyway, just in case she changed her mind. She didn't. That memory hit me like a soft punch in the ribs. Still, I poured a glass of wine, stepped onto the porch, and sat in the fading light. The breeze smelled like early spring, clean, cool. A neighbor's dog barked. Somewhere a wind chime played faintly in the distance. That's when the memories started flooding in. Every birthday I spent alone, telling myself it was okay because the kids were grown and busy. Every Christmas Eve where I made double portions and packed leftovers into containers that stayed in the fridge untouched. Every milestone I supported, every breakdown I absorbed. The shoes I didn't buy, the trips I didn't take, the 15-year-old sedan I kept driving because I thought there would be time for me later. There never was. And now I had become a footnote in my daughter's love story. Not a guest, not a mother, a transaction. A woman named Carol, Nate's mother, who barely knew Jenna, somehow had more sway in my child's life than I did. Her opinion carried more weight. Her approval was more important. Because she was family, apparently. But what was I? The woman who raised Jenna, fed her, loved her through every heartbreak and stood by her when she didn't even love herself? Was that worth nothing now? And then I thought of the line in that email, "Should be just like being there, LOL." It wasn't just hurtful, it was humiliating. Around 9 p.m. my doorbell rang. At first, I thought about ignoring it. I figured it was a neighbor or maybe another package delivery, but something told me to look. It was Adam. He stood there on the porch, still in his office clothes, He sighed and started pacing the living room like he used to when he was studying for finals. Jenna's freaking out. She says you're not coming to the wedding now, that you're being difficult. I set my glass down carefully. Difficult? For not attending a wedding I was disinvited from? He rubbed the back of his neck. You know how Nate's parents are. They're traditional. They're covering most of the costs. I raised an eyebrow. Traditional? Adam, I already gave her $30,000. I was about to send $50,000 more. He stopped pacing. You were going to send $50,000 more? Was, I said coolly, but not anymore. He blinked. His face went pale. Mom, they're counting on that money, the venue, the caterer. Not my problem anymore, I said flatly. His voice jumped an octave. Of course it's your problem. She's your daughter. And I'm her mother, I said quietly. A mother who was told to stay home and watch her own child's wedding on a screen. He looked stunned, as if that detail hadn't registered before. Maybe it hadn't. Maybe Jenna hadn't mentioned it to him. Or maybe he just assumed I'd be fine with it, the way I'd always been fine with everything. You always make everything about yourself, he muttered under his breath. That was the moment. That was when the final string snapped. I stood up slowly. Get out of my house. He froze. What? You heard me. Get out. Mom. No, I said, calm but firm. I've given everything I had, and I'm done being the villain in a story I wrote with love. He stood there a moment longer, then turned and walked out. The door clicked behind him, not slammed, not forced, just quietly closed. But it felt louder than any argument we'd ever had. And the strangest thing? I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. The next morning I woke up early. Sunlight streamed through the curtains. I brewed a pot of coffee, not the instant kind, but the good beans I'd been saving. I sat at the kitchen table in my robe, holding my favorite mug, and just breathed. 43 missed calls, a dozen messages, all from Jenna. They started out passive-aggressive. Mom, we need to talk. Why are you doing this? This is so childish. Then came the panic. The venue called. The payment didn't go through. If we don't pay by tonight, we lose everything. Followed by shame. Nate's parents are furious. They said this proves they were right about you. At 3:24 a.m., one final message. I don't understand why you're doing this to me. That one made me laugh. A dry, almost bitter kind of laugh. Of course she didn't understand. It was long, winding, a mixture of pleading and blame. Mom, I know you're hurt about the live stream thing, but this is extreme. We lost the deposit. The caterer is threatening to walk. Nate's parents are beyond upset. They say you're being dramatic. Then, the twist. We can talk about you coming to the ceremony, but we need the funds first. There it was. An invitation, conditional on my bank account. Not because they missed me, not because she realized what she'd done, but because they needed something again. I didn't reply. I closed the email and got back to work. Around noon, Greg stopped by my desk again. Lunch? He asked. That new Italian place just opened. I almost declined, like I always do. But I paused. Maybe I needed a break. Maybe I just wanted to sit somewhere that didn't ask anything from me. I nodded. I'd like that. Greg and I sat outside at a little cafe table tucked beneath a wide red umbrella. The restaurant was quiet, the kind of place you'd never notice unless someone told you about it. The pasta was warm, the bread soft, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself enjoy something. Between bites, Greg talked about his grandkids, 2 boys under 5, always sticky, always running. His eyes lit up when he spoke about chasing them around the park, exhausted but happy. At one point, he paused, looked at me gently, and said, "Forgive me, Linda, but you seem lighter today." I didn't expect to say anything. I'd planned to keep my walls up, to smile and nod and thank him for lunch, but something in me cracked open, just a little. So I told him. I told him about Jenna's email, about the money, about the live stream, about the silence I'd chosen instead of an argument. I told him about Adam showing up at my door, angry and confused. I told him I canceled the transfer and how freeing it felt. Greg didn't interrupt. He didn't try to fix it. He just listened. When I finished, he took a sip of his iced tea and said, "Sometimes the hardest part of love is learning when to stop giving, especially to the people we've given the most to." He reached across the table and gently squeezed my hand. "I think you did the right thing." And in that moment, I believed it too. When I got back to the office, more messages were waiting. Jenna again, Adam again. I ignored them all. I didn't need to explain myself to anyone anymore. My silence was enough. It had always been enough. They just never noticed. That evening, as I pulled into my drive, she and Jenna had been best friends since elementary school. I'd lost count of how many sleepovers she'd had at our house, how many cookies we'd baked together, how many movie nights we hosted, where I had to ask them to keep it down after midnight. She used to call me Mom Number 2. I hadn't seen her in years. "Mrs. McAllister," she said gently, brushing her coat sleeves like she didn't know what else to do with her hands. "I hope it's okay that I stopped by." "Of course," I said, unlocking the door. "Do you want to come in?" She nodded, following me inside. I flicked on the lights and made my way to the kitchen, pulled down 2 mugs from the cupboard. I was just about to make some tea. Rachel smiled faintly. "You still drink chamomile?" "Every night," I said, filling the kettle. "You still allergic to honey?" She laughed softly. "Yep, some things don't change." We stood there in the quiet, steam rising from the kettle, both of us unsure how to begin. "She sent you, didn't she?" I asked, finally. Rachel hesitated, then nodded. "She's a mess, Mrs. McAllister. The venue's gone, the florist canceled, Nate's parents are threatening to pull their support, Jenna doesn't know what to do." I placed the mugs on the counter, handed her one, and didn't say anything. "She knows she messed up," Rachel continued. "She just doesn't know how to fix it." I stirred my tea slowly. "Is that why you came? To fix it for her?" She shook her head. "No. I came to ask, is there anything she can say or do to change your mind?" I paused, letting the question settle between us. Would an apology undo the damage? Would a few tearful words erase the feeling of being excluded, of being reduced to a bank account? Would it make me forget that I was never part of the plan until they needed me again? "No," I said, quietly but clearly. "There isn't." Rachel's shoulders dropped. Not even if she apologizes? I handed her the mug of tea. Words are easy, Rachel, especially when people are desperate. But real love doesn't wait until you're empty to start seeing you. The people who love you, they don't need a crisis to remember who you are. She nodded, looking down into her tea. I get it, she said, even if she doesn't. I'm sorry, Mrs. McAllister. You don't need to be, I replied softly. You were always kind. We sat for a few more minutes. They settled for a small backyard ceremony a few weeks later, just a handful of relatives, Nate's parents, and a borrowed Bluetooth speaker playing some preloaded playlist. I wasn't invited. And this time, I didn't want to be. I spent that weekend visiting the coast. I stayed at a little inn near Cannon Beach, walked barefoot along the shore, and let the waves pull away everything I'd been carrying for too long. The air was salty and clean, the sun warm on my back. No expectations, no guilt, no phone ringing, just peace. In the weeks that followed, Jenna sent me one more email. Long, rambling, half apology, half justification. She talked about stress and pressure and how Nate's family had insisted on certain things. She said she never meant to hurt me. I read it once, then archived it. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. There's something almost sacred about letting go without bitterness. Not slamming the door, not screaming into the void, just choosing yourself. After I archived Jenna's email, I didn't wait for a response. I didn't analyze her words or search for sincerity in her punctuation. I didn't hit reply with a counterpoint or a list of all the ways she'd broken my heart. I didn't need to. Because I had finally learned something that had taken me 6 decades to understand. People show you what you mean to them, not with their apologies, but with their patterns. And I had seen enough. The following Monday, I started making small changes. Nothing big or dramatic, just quiet shifts. I unsubscribed from wedding planning newsletters. I deleted the calendar alert that said Jenna's wedding, Napa. I even rearranged the framed photos on my hallway wall, moving Jenna's engagement announcement from the center to a shelf in the guest room. It wasn't spite. It wasn't punishment. It was just reality, a subtle reclaiming of space, a shift in emotional gravity. At work, I threw myself into a new case with Greg. We were helping a nonprofit review their bylaws and restructure their board. It was meticulous work, the kind I loved, and for the first time in a while, I found joy in it. Not distraction, joy. One afternoon, Greg knocked on my office door. You ever think about retirement? He asked casually. I smiled. All the time. Why, you trying to get rid of me? He chuckled. No, not at all. I just figured someone as sharp as you might have a few things left on her bucket list. That night, I pulled out an old notebook I hadn't touched in years. The front cover was cracked, the spine a little loose. But the pages still held my handwriting. A list. Things I'll do when the kids are grown. I flipped through it slowly. Visit Alaska. Learn pottery. Grow a vegetable garden. Dance again. Real dancing. Not just in the kitchen with a broom. Read 100 books in 1 year. Spend an entire weekend in silence. I had written that list back when I was still packing lunchboxes and sewing Halloween costumes. I didn't know then that someday I'd forget I ever had dreams of my own. But here I was, alone, and somehow not lonely. And that list? It was waiting patiently. So I picked something simple. Pottery. There was a studio just 15 minutes from my house. Small, warm, filled with women and men of all ages hunched over spinning wheels. I signed up for a Tuesday night class. My instructor's name was Claire. She wore paint-stained overalls and talked like someone who'd grown up near the ocean. Calm, steady. I wasn't good at it. My first bowl collapsed like wet cardboard. Claire patted my shoulder. You're not here to be perfect. You're here to create. And I realized she was right. Every Tuesday night, I showed up. My hands got muddy. My nails broke. I laughed. And no one asked me for money. No one guilted me. No one expected anything from me other than to try. It felt revolutionary. One night, I got home from class and found a small envelope in my mailbox. Jenna's handwriting. Inside, a simple card. On the front, a photo of a vineyard in Napa, likely the one that never hosted her wedding. Inside, a note. Mom, I don't know if you'll read this, but I wanted to try again. I'm sorry. I truly am. I never meant to hurt you. I was caught up in so many things, and I lost sight of what really matters. I miss you. Love, Jenna. I set the card on my kitchen table, made a cup of tea, sat down, and stared at it. Was it sincere? Maybe. Did it matter? Not really, because this wasn't about revenge or punishment. It wasn't about making her feel what I felt. It was about me finally choosing not to abandon myself. I had spent my whole life being the giver, the fixer, the first to forgive. I was the one who sent care packages, checked in, kept the peace. I always showed up, even when it hurt. But this time, I didn't want to show up. Just because someone finally noticed I was gone. A few days later, Adam called. I almost didn't answer, but something in me said, give him a chance. Hey, Mom, he said awkwardly. I wanted to apologize. I stayed silent. I was out of line, he continued. That night at your house, I shouldn't have said those things. I let the pause stretch long enough for him to wonder if I'd hang up. Then I said, thank you for calling. He exhaled. I talked to Jenna. She's working through some stuff. I hope she is, I replied. I was just living. And with every small moment of peace, I kept coming back to one new rule I made for myself. If my presence is optional, then so is my effort. Spring gave way to summer, and with it came a sense of renewal I hadn't expected. My house, once filled with silence that echoed like a question, now felt calm, centered, whole. Not because anyone had come back, but because I finally had. One Saturday morning, I walked down to the local farmer's market, tote bag over my shoulder, sunglasses perched on my head. The strawberries were fresh, the flowers vibrant. A local musician played acoustic guitar near the coffee truck, and for a moment, the whole town felt like it was humming in tune. A woman I barely knew from the office stopped me near the herb stall. She had seen me around, asked if I had grandkids. No, I said with a smile, just 2 grown kids. But I'm starting to plant things of my own now. She laughed, thinking I meant tomatoes. And I did. But also, I didn't. Back at home, I laid everything out on my kitchen counter. Basil, a bundle of carrots, a fresh baguette, and I realized something. For the first time in years, I wasn't bracing. Not for a crisis, not for a call, not for guilt packaged as love. I didn't feel like I was waiting to be needed. That week, I took a pottery bowl I'd finally managed to finish, one that hadn't caved in or cracked in the kiln, and placed it on my coffee table. Not perfect, but real. Mine. It reminded me of something my therapist once told me after my husband died, back when I only went to one session and swore I didn't need help. Wholeness isn't about what's still intact. It's about what you've learned to live with. And I had lived with a lot. But now, I was learning to live for myself. Jenna and I didn't speak for a while. Weeks passed, then months. Occasionally, I'd get a holiday card or a forwarded meme that felt like a test balloon. I didn't ignore them, but I didn't rush to respond either. I wasn't cold. I was cautious. Some people need time to change. Others just need you to stop cushioning the fall. Adam visited more often. Sometimes he brought his fiancée, sometimes just himself. We'd sit on the porch, drink iced tea, and talk like adults, two people who'd stopped pretending that love meant never drawing lines. One evening, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I think I get it now." "Get what?" "You. Why you did what you did." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. He nodded slowly. "I think it scared us. You choosing yourself." I smiled. It scared me too. That fall, I signed up for a week. "What do you do with that kind of silence?" she asked, her voice cracking. I looked into the fire and said, "Sometimes silence isn't punishment. Sometimes it's space, a kind of truth." She nodded like she understood. Maybe she did. When I got back from the retreat, there was a letter waiting for me in the mailbox. Not an email, not a text, a handwritten letter from Jenna. Her writing looked tired, like she'd started over a few times. There were scratch-outs and tear marks. But she wrote the whole thing. She said she'd been selfish, that she had measured love by comfort, not by sacrifice. That she thought being an adult meant prioritizing appearances over people. That she was wrong. She said she wanted to rebuild, not just to fix what was broken, but to understand why it broke in the first place. I didn't reply right away. I sat with the letter for 3 days, let it breathe, let it echo. Then, finally, I picked up a pen and wrote her back. Not a novel, just a page. I told her I loved her, that I always had, that love didn't mean I'd go back to giving until I had nothing left, but if she was willing to start again, not from the place of mother and daughter, but from two women trying to understand each other, then I was willing too. She replied a week later. We had dinner the following month, just the two of us. It wasn't magic. There was no sweeping apology montage, no tears over dessert. But there was honesty, and maybe for the first time in our lives, that was enough. That was a year ago. We're not perfect now, but we're real, and real lasts longer than perfect ever does. These days, I live with a new kind of rhythm. I don't overextend. I don't rush to fill the silence. I don't say yes because I'm afraid of what no might cost me. I read, I garden, I throw clay on a wheel and mess up often. I'm still learning, but I've learned one thing I wish I could whisper to every woman who's ever felt invisible in her own family. You don't have to burn yourself to keep others warm. If your presence is a luxury they only notice when it's missing, then your absence is not cruelty, it's clarity. And sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you finally give to yourself. Sometimes love is loud and visible, but sometimes the strongest kind of love is the one you give to yourself, quietly, firmly, with grace. We spend so much time teaching others how to treat us.